Hey, this is Avi Gutman with another Ask Me Anything event brought to you by quantreasoning.com. I invite you to join me live next time. We do this every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can attend for free by starting your free trial at quantreasoning.com. Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that the concepts are going to be tested in any official material you look at. What changes over time, and I mean over a lot of times, over a decade or 2 decades, you're going to see some changes in the frequency with which you get different categories of questions. The most prominent example of that in quant is combinatorics and probability, which used to be tested a fair bit and now are approaching zero in terms of frequency. So that's going to impact the distribution of different question types that you encounter when you look at official material, especially if you consider the fact that when they choose which questions to retire from the actual test that then make their way to the published material, there's going to be an overrepresentation of the types of questions that they're no longer interested in testing. So when you look at officially published material, you're going to see an overabundance of probability and combinatorics questions only because those are questions that they're no longer very interested in testing. And so then people get the wrong idea. They're like, whoa, there's so much combinatorics and probability in these books, therefore there must be a lot of that on the test, but it's actually the other way around, because of this selection bias of what makes it into the books. Because if you're making it into the book, what does that mean? You've been retired from the actual test. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, why was it retired from the actual test? Some questions are retired because somebody memorized the question from the actual test and published it on some forum or on the dark web or something like that, so then they have to retire it. But most of the questions are retired for other reasons, like, this question isn't exactly testing something that we're still interested in testing. So when I was at Manhattan Prep, every one of us took the GMAT almost annually and then shared not what questions we saw, because that would be illegal, but we were able to share with one another the categories of questions, like, hey, did you see any combinatorics and probability? And over again, year after year after year, starting about 2013 maybe, we realized, hey, nobody's seeing these questions anymore. So that's kind of how we came to learn about these changes. I took the test 5 times altogether, the actual test, in 2006, 2011, 2015, 16, and 18. And only in 2006 did I see any combinatorics and probability questions. So that's just a comment I would make about the amount that we should rely on officially published materials. Are all officially published materials the same quality? By and large, I would say yes. I have heard that GMAT Focus, so if you go to gmatfocus.com, it's a associated website, I guess you would say, to MBA.com, gmatfocus.com. It's still from the GMAT, it's official material. And there you can get 3 official timed sets of only quant questions. And they're adaptive. So official, adaptive, timed sets. I believe it's 24 questions per set. And you can purchase 3 of them, 3 sets. I think it's $80 US for the 3 sets, or $30 each if you buy them one at a time. I heard that those questions are higher quality. And what I mean by that is they were retired from the GMAT more recently. So if the official guides have 15-year-old questions, maybe these are 7-year-old questions. I'm just making those numbers up, but this is what I heard from a reliable source. And that's probably why they're so expensive. It's more than $1 per question in those particular sets. But other than that, no, I don't know that there's any significant difference in quality among the published material. And I think there's way more than enough published material to use, such that we don't need to rely on unofficial material. And I do think that a lot of unofficial material is worse than useless. Like, it can actually harm you in that it will give you the wrong idea of what it is that the GMAT is really trying to test. I make the analogy in my book, in the preface to the book, using unofficial material for the GMAT is kind of like practicing ping pong for a tennis match, because it's kind of similar, some kind of similar principles, and it feels like you're doing the right, like you're practicing the right thing, but then it doesn't really translate, and you're actually going to cause yourself probably more harm than good by doing that. So I have a pretty strong opinion on using third-party material, and that's also why I really don't write questions for quant reasoning. I mean, there are a few drills that I have in the book that are just designed to help you practice one particular skill, but I don't try to mimic real GMAT questions because they're not going to be good. Definitely no more than once a week. I think once a week is the upper limit in terms of frequency. It depends a bit on how many hours a week you're devoting to the GMAT, and also what does your timeline look like. So I would say at the extreme, once a week is kind of as frequently as I would allow. And there is no other limit to the other extreme. In other words, I think it's absolutely fine and even good to spend 2 years preparing for the GMAT at a kind of slow burn. When you cook a steak, you want it to be at like 500 degrees Fahrenheit and it sears, and in 5 minutes it's on and you're done. Whereas if you're cooking, I don't know, chicken, then you want it to be at a much lower temperature and leave it longer. That's the much better way to prepare for the GMAT if you can. Now, not everybody has 2 years to prepare for the GMAT, but the longer you have, the better off you'll be. And then maybe it's appropriate to take a practice test once every 2 months, and that would be great. So it depends a bit on your timeline. It depends on how many hours a week you're devoting to it. But I look at it a lot like I look at bodybuilding. You don't spend 12 hours at the gym every day when you're bodybuilding. You take 5 years. You say 5 years from now, I want my fat percentage to be so-and-so, and I want my muscle mass to be so-and-so. And then you work at it an hour a day, 5 days a week for 5 years. I think that's ideally, that's how people would prepare for the GMAT. The benefit from taking a practice test is not in the actual taking of the practice test. The benefit from taking a practice test is in the learning that you get from reviewing that practice test. Hey, I'm just going to interrupt my own video for a moment here. If you're finding value in this video, please let me know in the comments below, and give this video a thumbs up. It really motivates me to keep uploading a new video every day. All right, back to the video. There's a really big problem with those analytics, particularly when you run out of time. Because if you run out of time, or even if you're worried that you'll run out of time, you start rushing. You don't actually have to run out of time. You just have to be worried that you run out of time. So let's say you're in question number 20 in the quant section. There's 11 questions left. And you look at the timer and you see there's only 10 minutes left. And you're like, wait, 10 minutes, 11 questions? Oh my God, that's less than a minute per question, right? So then you rush through those last 11 questions. And if those last 11 questions happen to be skewed towards geometry, then the report that they print out for you says you're bad at geometry. Are you though? Or is it only looking like you're bad at geometry because you spent too long on the first 10 questions, which were all word problems? So then the report is kind of useless, and it's actually worse than useless because it's telling you that you're bad at stuff that you actually might be good at, and vice versa. So that's the problem with those reports. What you can do with an official practice test when you're reviewing it is you can look at, okay, what was the question? You think back to, how was I feeling when I was doing this question? Was I feeling under time pressure? Was I relaxed? Did I make a mistake here? Was the mistake a careless algebra mistake? Should I have even used algebra in the first place? If not, why did I? Was my mistake the fact that I missed a word in reading the question stem? And if so, why did I miss that word? Was I reading too fast? If I was reading too fast, why was I reading too fast? How did I change that habit? Right? So those are the kinds of questions that you ask, and you really dig deep into what was it about this particular question that made me get it wrong. And when you categorize them based on, okay, that's geometry, that's work rate, and that's finance, then you miss the thread that's connecting all three of them, as we've seen many times in these AMAs. You're like, oh, this concept can be tested in any one of those categories. And so that's the other issue with the reports, is they tell you that you're bad at a certain category, but wait, that concept could be tested in any of the categories. So are you actually bad at that category, or are you bad at that concept? If you found this video useful, go to quantreasoning.com for a lot more where that came from. You should also click that like button and let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to make future videos about. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do that and click that bell below so you get notified about future videos. See you next time.